Joining us now on Houston Sports Talk is Texans beat writer Brian T. Smith. If you're a Texans fan, I'm sure you listeners are reading his great reporting on Chron.com. And, of course, check him out on Twitter at Chron Brian Smith. Pleasure to have you with us, Brian. And I'd love to get your overall thoughts about the new Texans after watching OTAs and minicamp. What has struck you most about this new regime?
This is Bill O'Brien's team already. You know, he's a first-year NFL coach, limited NFL experience. Obviously, he had a nice run with the Patriots, but that was Bill Belichick's team. He goes to Penn State for 2 years and just takes over a program that was an absolute disaster post-Joe Paterno, allows them to really turn things around, save face, move that whole regime forward. But you have no idea how that's going to translate to the NFL. He comes to the Texans, and he very, very quickly has not just put his imprint on this team, but he's changed the culture. They have never been tough. They've never been fiery. They've never been nasty. We're going to have to see that truly play out once they put pads on and really, you know, as the season unfolds. But the mindset has changed. This is a team now, and granted, they have to stick together for 16 games, but you can feel it, you can see it, and they just seem to get it. I really felt that the team fell apart last year under Gary Kubiak. That's part of the reason he was fired midseason. And even in 2012, and I always say this, when they went 12-4, I started covering the team, helping out at the end of that year. You know, I was around them a little bit, and having done the NBA and MLB, and you know, you start to get a good pulse for what makes teams and what makes things click. The Texans never had it. They just always seemed weak at the worst possible times. Bill O'Brien is trying to change that. And the fact that in 5 months, without putting the pads on, he's changed the culture is a huge testament to his first stage being an NFL head coach.
Yeah, the mental part will be big for Bill O'Brien if he can turn that around. And one of the big mysteries so far, one of the big questions that just won't go away is number 80, Andre Johnson. Do you think this comes down to either a reworked contract or a trade for Andre?
100%. There's no other way around it. And I've been saying this for a couple of months now. You know, the Chronicle's reported this many times, and you know, the national people are going to say what they say, and on and on. But this is what it comes down to. It comes down to Andre Johnson. He is frustrated. It's not like this started a month ago, though, when he spoke out in May at the Women's Center. This has been building for not just months, for years. You know, Andre Johnson has sacrificed his body in his career for this team. And if you know what, if you're the Texans or if you're fans, you can be just as frustrated as Andre Johnson. He is very, very well paid. He's set, and his future family should be set for generations to come. But this is modern pro sports. It's about respect. It's about rings. It's about egos and brands and all that stuff. And it's just ironic because the general perception of Andre is a very, very positive one. He's great in the community. He gets it. He doesn't have the normal flashy ego that we associate with pro sports stars. He's been wonderful for the Houston Texans. But to Andre and to the people around him, and really that's all that matters in their world, in their little circle, he doesn't have anything to show for his time with the Texans because they've never been a consistent winner. He's now dealing with his third rebuild since 2003 when he joined the organization, and this one's probably not going to be very pretty. It's not sexy. It's not alluring. They don't have a young quarterback, that's ready for week one. Tom Savage is a project. Andre Johnson knows this. His people know this. So they need something to ease this pain, so to speak, from their perspective. And usually the only way to do that in the NFL is either you change teams, which is almost impossible for the Texans to trade Andre Johnson at this point, or it's money. So it's probably going to be Bob McNair coming through and making this go away like he did in 2010, or, Andre's going to have to continue to sit out and try and build some leverage, which he has none of which right now. I don't think this is going to end anytime soon. I would love to see Andre Johnson in camp on day one, in late July. It's hard to see that right now because I don't think they're going to back down. They don't have any reason to. I would not be surprised at all if Andre Johnson is not, in a Texans uniform for the first couple weeks of training camp. This thing comes to a head, and maybe they have to put in an official trade request to get their way, or Bob McNair finally comes through and says, you know what, we're going to say you're a Texans for life, and let's get your butt back on the field and start playing football.
Could they make him a Texan for life? The assumption is after this season that he might even be a salary cap cut. So, like you said, is it just Bob McNair going in there, and what could that mean long-term implication-wise for the Texans?
The financial implications are horrible for the Texans. I mean, right now it's a very, 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 very favorable contract for the Texans, and a lot of this is Andre Johnson's own doing. The initial renegotiation that he signed was very team friendly. There was a brief period where Andre was the highest paid player in the NFL. I think that was great for him to hit here. It hasn't worked out that way long term. I'm not going to say that he's underpaid. I also think there's something that really gets swept under the rug here. The fact that Andre Johnson would not be Andre Johnson on another team. There's a reason he catches so many balls. It's because the Texans don't have any other great wide receivers. They haven't since he's been in uniform. It's been tight ends and Andre Johnson. Right now you have DeAndre Hopkins, but he's only in his second year, and Andre Johnson was kind of the security blanket for Matt Schaub for all those years. I mean, I think in a different system, on a different team, he's catching 60, 70 passes. It's not like he's a downfield threat. He's not great in the red zone. They haven't been able to work that out with him. So to Andre Johnson, he's probably bigger and better and more important than he is in the NFL. And so getting back to the money issue, if you're the Texans, why in the world would you guarantee his contract next year or extend him a couple of years or anything when you're already, you've been dealing with salary cap issues? You have to worry about extending J.J. Watt. You have a lot of issues, and you need to go out and add some real free agents in the next couple of years. You can't tie yourself down to Andre Johnson when he's 33, 34, 35, and at some point he's going to start declining. So from the Texans' perspective, it's going to be a very, very difficult decision. From Bob McNair's perspective, though, what's $15 million? Granted, it's a hard cap in the NFL, but they can find a way to make that work if they want to, because if the problem is if you lose Andre Johnson, granted, the seats are sold, but you don't have anything on this team other than J.J. Watt to sell to the fans. And at what point do you start to turn fans off when you go from 2-14 to, let's say, 6-10 this year? You lose Andre Johnson. What do you have on this team anymore? So they're in a pretty precarious spot right now to where they have to be careful. They have to be financially smart. They can't give in. But Andre Johnson, as this thing builds up, he's going to start to build some leverage. They're going to have to find a way to get him back on the field and get him in a Texan uniform. And unfortunately, in the NFL, the only way to do that usually is money.
Going to some of the other wide receivers, Brian, can you tell us about what you've seen from DeVere Posey with the increased snaps he's seen and what you've seen out of the battle for the slot receiver position between probably Alan Bonner and Mike Thomas?
I don't think it's going to be Bonner. I think you can throw that out right now. I think the guy has really no NFL experience. Thomas makes more sense. Keyshawn Martin is totally in contention for that, and so is Posey. There's no reason that Posey couldn't hold that spot down. Out of those three guys, Thomas, Martin, and Posey, Posey has shown the most promise. Keyshawn Martin has never been consistent. Doesn't seem like he really wants to get hit very much. As a returner, he's never proven himself, and I thought that the fact that Bill O'Brien came out and said that the return position, kickoff and punts, is wide open actually was an indictment of Martin from his overall performance last year. Posey should take a step forward. Martin should take a step forward. And if Mike Thomas can actually, rebound and improve himself in the NFL again, those are all interesting components. But they don't have anybody who's set. They don't have anybody who's established. It's going to be, Garrett Graham, Ryan Griffin, Andre Johnson, hopefully DeAndre Hopkins, and then everything else is going to be piecemeal for this team.
You've been listening to Houston Chronicle Texans beat writer Brian T. Smith. Check him out on Chron.com or follow him on Twitter @ChronBrianSmith. And we're going to have more with Brian down the road. Pleasure to have him on the show. You can listen to our podcast interviews and get more of our Texans coverage on HoustonSportsTalk.net.